For some reason, I decided to start with the ear instead of the eyes. Normally I do the eyes, but I guess it's because I like to draw left to right and the ears were the biggest part, not really the eyes. So working on this, of course, you could see the first couple of layers are the general kind of colors that you see. And then you start to add a little bit more, some pink tones and some cool blue tones in there just to add a nice contrast. But you do want to leave a little bit of that slit in the middle. That way you can add a contrast between the back part of the ear and the front part. Because the eyes are so small, there's not a lot of detail to them, but you could see that they're slightly different for each side, but it does have a little bit of that curve over the top, kind of creating like an eyebrow effect for these eyes. They're actually really cute ultimately, but I just used a simple black and a little bit of some light blue. For the fur itself, there's a lot of sporadic kind of fur going on in the pig. Now there really isn't actual quote-unquote fur. It's not thick or combined together, but it definitely has more of that scraggly look. So you can use a sharper pencil to create longer lines, and then that kind of creates a little bit more of that scratchy look. And then remembering to kind of remember where the sun is pointing down on the animal here, so you can actually draw the highlights and the lowlights a little bit easier. So you can see at the top there's a little bit of some highlights going on, so I left that with some of that light blue. And then I darken up the rest of the fur using a black colored pencil, because there is quite a lot of black going on in this kind of fur. But then there's a little bit of pink because, you know, it is a pig. There is going to be a little bit of pink going on. Now I'm also using that Gamsol Mineral Spirit Oil to kind of brush and smooth out some of these areas, especially for smaller portraits. It is a lot easier just to use that instead of adding a bunch of layers and then ultimately just having it all blend together a little bit too well. So then I also added a little bit of some burnt sienna in some of that fur because there is some red in with some of those cool tones. So applying a little bit of that rusty red with a little bit of the blue in the highlights, it just starts to really combine together and it looks really good that way. So I highly encourage you to try that out as well. Work with the warm tones and the cool tones all together. And then for the other ear, there's actually not a whole lot going on. It's about the same as the other one. There's a little bit of pink, a little bit of some brown colors, and just really focusing on the top part of the ear and then the bottom part. So the inside, which is pink, and then the fur that's kind of coming out of the ear. So those things are really important. You'd also want to pay attention to the direction of the fur. That way it can look more realistic, more like the actual reference image. Don't forget, you can also use a slice tool to kind of etch away some of these little stray hairs. That's really ultimately what I end up using it for, is more of the stray hairs than just working on highlights, because it does tend to kind of look a little bit too scratchy, too scraggly if you end up creating too much detail with that slice tool. Now this is my favorite part, drawing the nose. It's just absolutely adorable. So the nostril part, I actually, instead of doing black, I used a burnt sienna to kind of get in that nice reddish tone. I normally just have it straight up black, but I played around with it and I did see that there was some warmer colors in there. So I applied that and then kind of smoothed all those colors together, and then applied more layers on top using pinks, browns, and a little bit of I'd say a little bit of some like burnt sienna and some grays in there too, just to have that nice contrast, because there is that gray kind of going in with some of that pink. And the nose kind of has some of that wrinkly squished effect at the top, so it kind of added those lines in there as well. And then the mouth part, there's not a whole lot to it, but it is a similar color to the nose, so I'm just kind of incorporating that. And then of course there's a little bit of some chin hairs underneath. It's really turning out absolutely adorable. And if you're actually interested in learning to draw pet portraits or just learning to draw animals in general, feel free to check out the description below. I have a bunch of links to my pet portrait program, as well as just individual classes or the full membership, which you get access to all of my classes that I have taken, that I've done in the past, as well as tips and tricks. So I'm just kind of fixing up some of these areas, making sure that the colors are nice and sharp and the tooth of the paper is not showing through, tooth of the paper is the kind of like the bumps, the white bumps that you see, and ultimately what you need to do to avoid that is to just keep going and make a nice waxy coating with the colored pencils. So this first leg has the most amount of pink in it, so I'm going to use a little bit of some pinks, some grays, some darker brown colors, and then kind of blend it all together. Now the hoof part is of course going to be like two little hooves, so it has that little V shape there. Definitely want to emphasize that, because in the actual reference image, the background is a part of the animal too. So like the legs, the rest of the body is a little bit more blurred. So I kind of tried to create the same effect as much as possible while still creating a little bit of some detail. If you're wondering what kind of colored pencils I'm using or any of the materials, I do have a materials list that you can download in the description below. But moving on here, so this next leg, there's a lot of black happening in the shoulder area, and then kind of like the neck area is just a little bit different. So you just want to kind of work your way around and make it nice and smooth, since this is more of the background, or like you could say the foreground area instead of the main focus, which is the head. So this should be a little bit easier to do than the head itself, because there's not a whole lot of detail to it. And ultimately, I really did stick to the same colors that I used for the head there. That way it has a nice consistency. And if you do want to go back and make some adjustments, go ahead and do so too. That's really important to just kind of go from one section to the next. And then once you have a good area covered, go back and make some adjustments. As you can tell, like I had to kind of work on the eyes, make them a little bit darker, and then have some stray hairs going out. Now the rest of the body here is pretty much the same thing. So you just focus on where the colors are actually located, because this kind of pig has more of some black spots on it. So we're just going to use pure black, maybe a little bit of some dark brown, like a dark sepia, in with the black. That way it's not just a flat black color. And then just kind of blend it all together using some of that mineral spirit oil, or you can just use a white color pencil to do the blending if you don't have that kind of tool. And then I wanted to kind of have something underneath for the animal to stand on, which is in the original image as well. So I just kind of created a little bit of some like dry dirt area. So I used some light cream colors with some browns, started to blend it all together, and then I incorporated some more colors in there, some little specks too, like using a dark sepia color, which kind of creates a dirty looking ground, like he's outside. And yeah, so then I used some light grayish blue colors just to have a nice contrast, and then blended it all together. Now I'm using one direction, that way you can kind of see like, you know, that it's a floor, that's a ground. And then I did add a little bit of some shading on the feet that are actually on the ground. And then I kind of used some white color pencil just to create some little highlight areas too, because you do want to have some highlights in there to add some contrast. I really hope that this video was helpful. Please do not forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.